it's a sorry state of affairs. It's really kind of scary. And you know how every government in history has paid for such deficits? Printing money. And that's exactly what's going to happen here, which is why I work at one of the largest bullion dealers in America, and why I tell people you need to protect yourself with real money that can't be devalued, or certainly will maintain its value when the fiat currency is devalued.
Well, fiat currency has always been devalued over time. At some point, it just kind of goes out of existence, right? It just gets so watered down. But right now, we have a Federal Reserve that can print without us really knowing what's totally going on. It's transparent. My understanding from reports, and I don't know if they're all true, but they've printed upwards of $30 trillion.
Well, the amount of money that they've printed, we'll never know, because so much of it is now covert. It's kind of like I think back at that TARP, the lessons they've learned. One back in 2008, they were like a deer in headlights, and were like, oh my God, there's a financial crisis here. How could we have not seen it? And the way they reacted were things like, oh, well, we got to get TARP done, but we needed the approval of Congress. And,
but that's ridiculous, because let's face it, they shut down Congress for $900 billion, right?
Well, that's
which is
point.
A lot of money. But then they did a partial audit of the Fed, and we find out $16 trillion was what was.
That's right.
So it was a big clown act.
My point is, and in 2006, they discontinued the publication of the M3 money supply. They said it was too expensive to do the work to figure out how much it was. But the point is that most of what they do now is covert. So when they say they, quote, ended QE, I can only laugh, because, for one, their own balance sheet hasn't gone down a penny in the time that they are theoretically starting to unwind. And, of course, interest rates, despite them theoretically ending QE, are at all-time lows, as in the lowest in the history of the 250 years of this nation. And of course, you see the manipulation of the stock market, which runs up every single day in the exact same pattern, despite the worst fundamentals in history. Look, the fact is the Fed prints astronomical amounts of money. And the only reason the inflation in this country is not as bad as it is overseas is because we have the reserve currency. So we can print unlimited amounts, and the rate of inflation goes up more like a frog in a pot than like you in a pot. And overseas, people don't realize, it's amazing how Americans, they're so secular because they think the world revolves around them. They don't realize there's only 300 million Americans. There's 7.2 billion other people. And of those 7.2 billion other people, the vast majority hold currencies that are at or near, or in many cases, way below their all-time low values. These people are really seeing major inflation, and in some cases hyperinflation, as we speak. Whereas here, it's funny, I write an article for free every day at milesfranklin.com. Today's article, it's called, in the spirit of the political campaign, it's the inflation stupid, which is why you own precious metals. The fact is, they can say all they want about how inflation is low, but it's almost insulting to say that inflation is going up by less than 2% a year if you are a sentient being in this country who has rent or is trying to buy a house or has insurance, let alone health insurance, or is a child going to school.
Or if you just go make a trip to the local coffee shop and have to pay $5 for a simple latte. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this daily. It starts adding up.
Yeah, I mean, even if they'll be like, oh, look, but the oil price fell. Yeah, I mean, it fell, but it's still much higher than it used to be. And oil energy is only a few percent of your overall budget. It's really the things that really, really kill people are housing, whether you're renting. Rents are rising parabolically at an all-time high right now, or buying. No one could afford to buy. No one could get a mortgage right now, or insurance. I mean, health insurance is a huge...
Health insurance, I think, is the one that's really off the charts. The other thing is secondary education, or if you're putting your kids through private school. I mean, I look at, we're in the top, 2% or something of income when I was checking it out, and I can't believe we are, my husband and I, and we don't feel like we have any money. You know what? We're sending two kids to college.
Remember when a millionaire was a big deal? A millionaire, right? It was a big deal. A millionaire, you're still terrified when you're a millionaire these days. First of all, because when you die, they're going to take half of it anyway.
Well, but if you're sending kids, I got my kid in college. I have my daughter's at a private school, which we feel strong. She's at I can go on and on about why we do this, and everybody has their right to do whatever they want, but we pay money for it. But we feel like we don't have any money at the end of the day. And when they're both in college, oh my God. You know?
Yeah, well, look, when you're in the 1%, you feel like it's okay. But when you're in the, as you say, even the 2 to 10%, it's at the point where, I have money, but so much, it could be gone so quickly. There's so many things out there that could take it so quickly. It's just not enough because of the inflation of everything, let alone, I'm just putting my daughter into preschool next month for the first time, and that costs a lot of money.
Well, now imagine having
how much will college cost?
Well, I know having a couple of people. My son's at Northwestern Chicago, and I'm like, oh my god! And then you have my daughter. She's at a Visitation High School in the Twin Cities. I think you're not in the Twin Cities. Are you on the West Coast? Denver. Okay, so she's going to a private school in Twin Cities, which, it's a chunk of money. And by the end of the day, we're thinking, oh my gosh, we don't have any money. And so now I'm watching what coffee I buy every day and where we're getting our, I don't know, whatever. We can't go out eat as much because that stuff starts to really add up. And I got to I got to buy my kids. Next thing you know, we're going to Boston for my daughter's hockey tournament. Geez, I don't have any money left over. And so that's the daily grind now. And you think about it, how much money we're college educated. We both have graduate advanced degrees, and all these things. And I'm thinking the average person, think of how much they struggle if we're, I shouldn't be complaining, but the average person, I can't even imagine.
Well, that's the state of America, and that's the whole thing with the recovery. Again, they talk about a recovery, and they say there's more jobs. The jobs they say, and they're all fictitious jobs, everyone knows that, but the jobs they say are jobs in, for instance, retail and waiters and bartenders. The problem is the numbers tell you that retail is doing as bad as it was at the bottom of the 2008-2009 crisis. And so is the restaurant data. People are not going out to dinner anymore. Yet they'll tell you that there's all these new jobs in retail and in restaurants. I mean, it's just a lie. The experience of the average person is, I wrote an article almost a year ago in October of last year. It was titled "The Worst Economy of Our Lifetimes." But that was nothing compared to the way things are now. Everything that I was looking back then is much, much worse now. And now it's a global thing. China's falling apart. Japan's falling apart. We have negative interest rates everywhere. Now we have the Brexit, which is only going to force, the European Union apart, which is going to cause more cutbacks in spending and fearfulness and falling currencies. And, right now the oil price and the commodity prices are near multi-decade lows, which is only going to cause more defaults, et cetera. The point is, there's no one out there that's benefiting except for the 1%. That's where almost all of the money from TARP all the way up to QE4 and whatever else they're doing now, that's where the money is gone. And it's created, this illusion of a stock market that tells us something that's so detached from reality. It's almost appalling. It's gotten to the point where even the mainstream shills, day after day I'm reading articles about how the big banks, the top mutual fund and hedge fund investors I just don't get it. And it's, well, how can you not get it? Can you not see the money printing? Can you not see them tell you we will do whatever it takes? Did you see after the Brexit, every central bank said we will do everything in our power. We will provide unlimited liquidity to make sure everything's fine. And sure enough, just like when the Fed raised rates in December and the yuan devaluation in August, sure enough, the market pops right back up. Because they're trying to create an illusion, and we started at the beginning of the call.
That's crazy because
that doesn't match reality. Yeah.
Well, because we should be in a recession. We should have a healthy, natural recession about now, right? We haven't had that, and they just keep propping it up. So we don't even have what we really need just naturally, right? Every 7 years there's a recession, and I don't even know if that's natural. That could just be built so they can take their profit off the top.
But that's yet another part of the difference between reality and what they tell you. Look, no, you have to have recessions. That's what if you have capitalism. That's what happens. You have boom and bust. It's happened.
Yeah, but
forever.
they're accelerated so that people can take profits and.
No. They're not accelerated. What happens is they're holding back. That's exactly what we're talking about.
They're holding back right now, but
the point is you can't stop recession. And the fact is that we have this supposed greater recovery with the worst, all these things we're talking about across the board. The only thing that's gone up is debt and real unemployment. And it's now the second longest, quote, expansion in U.S. history. What does that tell you about how desperate they've been to prevent this recession, which must come? What will it look like if they keep saying that there's GDP growth for the next 5 years. It'll be the longest expansion in history, except it'll be one where you have the lowest labor participation rate and the lowest home ownership and the highest debt and the highest entitlements and the biggest budget deficit. That will be the longest expansion in history.
But I think for me, who sees all that, it's actually kind of scary because you start to wonder, well, why? What's really that's scary. And when I look at the stock market, my understanding is that there's more money that's been taken out by the average Joe over the last year.
Another thing.
And so how can these numbers be? And so you hear these numbers and then you see what else is going on. And being so disconnected, it actually is kind of scary because then you wonder what's really going on.
Yeah, and forget the average Joe. The average Joe has no savings. I mean, more than half of Americans have no savings. The average retail investor in this country is long gone because those who didn't lose their shirt in the dot-com bubble, what were reflated in the 2005 to 2007, whatever you call it, housing boom, they've lost everything there, and now the economy's been going downhill since. There's no more retail participation.
There's still a lot of 401k money, and there's still a lot of pension money.
But I'm talking about percent of retail participation. Yeah, there are 401ks have always existed, but there's a lot less of that money than there used to be.
Because they're finding different ways to put it, different ways.
And it's highly concentrated now in much fewer people because most people were wiped off the map in 2000 and 2008. And what you're talking about, more people taking money out, it's not the retail. Retail left the building long ago. Now it's institutional money that's been leaving. And for instance, these last 4 months, the market's rallied to record highs. The problem is we've had record institutional outflows from stocks. And who's been buying it? The central banks. In fact, the central banks have been admitting it now. The Japanese.
Well, they have to because everybody's like, "Oh, come on, what's going on?"
I mean,
you
but
have
the point
to be
is,
buying
you now have central banks admitting that not only are we buying bonds with our QE, the biggest three, Japan, Switzerland, and China, admit we are buying stocks with printed money. They're telling you that. So, of course, the United States is, and the ECB is buying corporate and junk bonds. Of course, they're buying stocks.
Yeah, but then they're buying in a certain way, they're buying out the corporations.
Yes, exactly. I wrote an article a few months ago called The Ultimate Endgame of Communism, and I wrote it after the Japanese central bank, which is the craziest of all because they started this process long before all of us because their demographics, their average age is 10 years older, so their bust started 10 years earlier. They admitted that they own more than half of all the stocks in the country, the ETFs, and as a result, they're a top 10 holder of more than 90% of the stocks in the Nikkei average.
Okay, well, let's say if they keep doing, let's imagine this process keeps going. They could get to a point where they own 50% or more of all the corporations in our country. Okay, so now let's say that happens and we're essentially a completely government-owned thing. Could that... Now, do you believe that's a grand conspiracy, or do you think we're just all clueless and it's just happening because we don't know what else to do?
Well, you ask very good questions, Sarah, because especially in my world, I report on alternative media things and, for instance, the manipulation of gold, which I've been talking about for 15 years and proving because I'm a Wall Street analyst by background. So I don't just, have conspiracy theories. I prove it.
Well, because I don't like conspiracy theories. I liked it to be real. Otherwise, nobody takes it seriously. So I want to know, is it possible for somebody to actually, to a group of people to actually plan this, or is it just we're just so desperate and so out of control that this is what happens?
Right, and that's why this is such a great question, because in my world, I am exposed to many, many people who have theories about this, and many people say very strongly it's the elites, it's the Rothschilds, it's the Bilderbergs, it's the bankers, it's this. And look, I mean, yes, there's definitely a lot of people out there who have similar goals. Like, for instance, every one of the major Western nations has a goal of maintaining the status quo of fiat currency. But to believe they're all getting together when, first of all, they all hate each other, they don't even speak the same language, they have completely different goals, to think that a small group of people are planning this. I mean, you can't make up fiction stories about how like what's going on in Japan with their helicopter money. No, I believe, as I've called them, that it's just a bunch of Keystone cops. They wake up every day playing defense. The fact is these Keystone cops happen to be armed with printing presses and care of Wall Street, some of the most diabolical modern financial and trading technology around. They can hide everything. The Fed can hide all its money printing. They can trade offshore in high frequency trading and hide what they're doing. And they're very good at manipulating markets and economic data to the point where they've been able to kick the can for a long time. But the point is, at some point, and that's